I would like to acknowledge the territories that we live, work, and play in. My name is Angela, and today I will be providing the summary for you of the 2021-2022 FNHA financial report. I will go over the financial results from the FNHA's audited financial statements. Please note that a copy of this presentation will be made available to you. For the 10th year in a row, the FNHA received a clean audit opinion by our external auditors from KPMG. The FNHA board reviewed the financial statements and the audit report in detail with both management and the KPMG. This information was also presented to the members at the FNHA AGM. The statements reflect that FNHA is in good financial shape, with expenses being managed using funding available. Any unspent fiscal year revenue is added to our unrestricted or internally restricted net assets and is available for future one-time initiatives. This includes funding directly to communities to enhance and transform health services, as well as through joint investments in initiatives with our provincial and federal partners. FNHA is guided by sound financial management practices and principles that look at the overall good of the organization. To ensure accountabilities are met, strong policies and procedures are in place to ensure that all activities and expenditures are sound. This includes ensuring the appropriate delegated authorities approve the use of funds. Both internal and external audit services provide controls and oversight for the FNHA board and ensure the FNHA is in policy compliance. FNHA reports financial results and activity to the Finance and Risk Management Committee and FNHA board, both quarterly and at year end. The FNHA's overall financial strategy aims to ensure that financial resources are aligned with the needs and priorities of community and the FNHA, while integrated planning and budgeting processes identify both short-term and long-term funding requirements. In general, the principles are focused upon effective use of resources to address priorities and ensure sustainability. The focus of today's presentation is on the financial results reported in the independent auditor's report found in the 2021-22 FNHA annual report. The independent auditor's report is also publicly available on the FNHA website. This is a statement of operations from the independent auditor's report. It shows overall financial results by reporting revenue by the source of funds and expenditures by program group and subgroup. The financial results reflects the following. Total revenue equals $736.5 million, total expenses of $722.5 million, and unexpended revenues of $14 million. The excess revenue over expense is retained by FNHA for investment in identified priorities. This visual shows the revenue received from federal and provincial partners. Amounts received fund ongoing operations and programs and services to communities, targeted initiatives with specific terms and conditions, as well, in some cases, funding that must be utilized within a specific period of time. The most significant amounts are $658.9 million from federal government and the province of BC providing $69.6 million. The table on this slide details the $14 million excess revenue over expenses. The first 4 rows of the table show amounts related to CFA base funding. This refers to funding received by FNHA from the Canada Funding Agreement. This is FNHA's primary source of funds, which supports ongoing operations, services, and programs. Variances related to base funding include health benefits expenses were $15.98 million, greater than amounts budgeted in the fiscal year due to improvements in access and significant increase in utilization and cost. The budget related to primary care and wellness was not fully utilized. This funding supports the opening of the 15 First Nation-led primary care clinics. The timeline for opening and requirements for funds has shifted due to engagement planning and startup requirements. Corporate services, governance and engagement, and other program service variances are due to reasons such as challenges in recruitment and retention and impacts on operations and the use of funds due to COVID. The shortfall of $5 million in deferred investment funds reflects the use of funding received but unspent in the prior year, but which was preserved for 2021-22 in an FNHA reserve for continued use for an initiative. The balances are reported as internally restricted funds in the financial statements. The deficit of $8.8 million for specified purpose funds is related to a shortfall of restricted funding related to Gira, Kalapu, and Deschanel. Receipt of this funding shortfall is an ongoing discussion with the federal government. The expenses as reported in the Statement of Operations show 92% of funds are spent on program services supporting communities and community members, 33% on health benefits, 41% on programs and service funding to communities in funding agreements, 18% in health services and programs, approximately 1% on governance and engagement, near 7% on corporate operations. For more insight into FNHA's expenditures and use of funds, the financial results will be described for each of the program groups shown in the Statement of Operations. The first expense section is corporate operations. Corporate operations includes the following organizational groups: the FNHA Board, the Office of the CEO, the Legal Department, Communications, Finance and Corporate Services, Human Resources, Information Management and Information Technology, and the expenses for the amortization of capital assets is also reported in this area. The financial results for corporate operations are explained on the next slide. The fiscal year expenses were $47.5 million. This is an increase of $2.2 million from the prior fiscal year. This is primarily due to an increase in compensation costs as per collective agreement requirements and the FNHA compensation strategy, as well as recruitment into vacant positions. The expenses for corporate operations reflect 6.6% of the total FNHA expenses for 2021-22. For comparison, in 2020-21, corporate operations was 6.9% of the fiscal year total expenses. In the Statement of Operations, the Governance and Engagement section includes the First Nations Health Council as well as the First Nations Health Directors Association. Both are shown in the distinct subsections in the Statement of Operations. First Nations engagement is also included in this section. This includes expense amounts related to the following: regional caucus meetings, regional table meetings, regional engagement staff, last remaining community engagement hub agreements, and the gathering wisdom for a shared journey. The fiscal year expenses for governance and engagement were $8.6 million. The year-over-year change in governance and engagement is an increase of $2.3 million due to an easing of COVID-19 related restrictions, resulting in the start of a return to normal engagement activity. At $8.6 million in expenses, this represents 1.2% of FNHA's $722.5 million in total expenses for fiscal year 2021-2022. In the prior fiscal year 2020-21, governance and engagement expenses represented 1% of FNHA expenses. In the Statement of Operations, the program and services expense amounts include 4 subsections: health benefits, which includes operational costs, benefit-related expenses such as dental and dental therapy; direct community services funding, which flows program and targeted initiative funds to communities and health service organizations in contribution agreements. Health services and programs, which includes costs related to program and service delivery, such as nursing and environmental health. And regional operations, which captures regional expense related to the support for operations, programs, and targeted initiatives. The financial results for each of these 4 subsections will be explained in the next slides. The fiscal year expenses for health benefits were $237.1 million. The year-over-year change in health benefits is a $36.4 million increase. This is an 18.1% increase from the prior fiscal year. The change is due to program transformation, trends in utilization, and costs related to the health benefit claim areas. In 2021-2022, the expense amounts equals 32.8% of the total FNHA budget of $722.5 million. In 2020-2021, the health benefit expenses amount was 30.6% of the total fiscal year expenses. The fiscal year expenses for direct community service funding were $291.5 million. The year-over-year change in direct community service funding is a $1.1 million decrease. This is primarily due to offsetting change in funding for targeted initiatives from provincial and federal partners. Additional funding for specific targeted initiatives was offset by reductions in others. The year-over-year change is also due to a change in program delivery approach, which resulted in funding being expended in health services and programs rather than direct community service funding. And one-time amounts were incurred in the prior year and did not require funding in 2021-22. This is related to rebuilding costs for facility destroyed by fire. In 2021-22, the expense amounts equals 40.3% of the total FNHA expenses of $722.5 million. The percentage of total expenses is changed from the percent in 2020-21, which was 44.5%. The fiscal year expenses for health services and programs were $130 million. The year-over-year change in program services is a $23.8 million increase. This is a 22.4% increase from the previous year and is primarily due to the following: COVID-19 response activities, additional funding and activities related to targeted initiatives, including opioid and addictions, and trauma-informed health supports. This increase was also due to an annual compensation increase as per the collective agreements, non-union increases as per the FNHA board-approved compensation strategy. In fiscal year 2021-22, the expense amounts equal 18% of the total FNHA expenses of $722.5 million. This is an increase from 2020-2021, which was 16.2%. The last section, regional operations, saw fiscal year expenses of $7.8 million. The year-over-year change in regional operations is $2.1 million, primarily due to salary and benefit related increases due to compensation increases as per collective agreements and the FNHA compensation strategy, and the ongoing work of regionalization to bring resources closer to home. In fiscal year 2021-22, the expense amounts equals 1.1% of the total FNHA expenses. The percentage of total expenses is only slightly changed from the percent in 2020-2021, which was 0.9%. This final slide shows how unspent funding in any fiscal year is retained and preserved for priorities and targeted initiatives. FNHA refers to these reserves as deferred investment funds. In accounting terminology, these are called internally restricted net assets. Surplus are due to a number of circumstances: conservative financial management, preserving funding to support initiatives, health human resource recruitment and retention challenges, contingency funding, unexpected or extraordinary requirements, pandemic impacts on funds utilization, governance, engagement, and operations and maintenance, extended timelines from focus on appropriate engagement and planning processes. The balance on March 31st, 2022 is $160.9 million, and that includes amounts retained in reserve in compliance with terms and conditions associated with funds from provincial and federal partners. This is $22.8 million. The terms and conditions require that FNHA retain in reserve any unspent funds related to the targeted initiative. The balance on March 31st, 2022 also includes $138.1 million in FNHA reserves. These are reserves created with FNHA board approval to address priorities and targeted initiatives. 74% or $102.5 million in FNHA reserves are for the following: tripartite partnership investment in treatment centers and mental health and wellness, equaling $49.7 million. Health benefit reserves to address funding pressures being realized and transformation, $35.9 million. Incremental investment in community facilities, $16.9 million. The other 26% is related to various targeted initiatives. All deferred investment funding is time limited, and these funds will ultimately be fully utilized. Current projections show amounts are utilized within the next few years. Moving forward, the FNHA will continue to make efforts to utilize the fiscal year funding to meet priorities and expectations. FNHA will then closely monitor the deferred investment funding, internally restricted net assets, with a focus on effective and timely utilization of the funds and identifying funding sustainability requirements. Thank you for watching this presentation. For full detailed financial statements, you can read the 2021-22 annual report at fnha.ca.